Ike, did you want to know?
No, you stated it well, Ms. Joseph stated it well. So we've done several public hearings on land use decisions this year. This is not one of the ones where I say you are like a panel of judges and there's going to be testimony and there's going to be cross-examining witnesses and all of that, right? So you do need to base your decision on anything you think is important. I will say in a decision like this, it is important that tonight, either way you rule, you outline the reasoning for why it is you're going to approve or disapprove it. Whereas in a traditional, straightforward rezoning, you can base it on any reason or pretty much no reason at all, as long as it's not arbitrary. In this situation, because it is analogous to like a spot zoning, the burden's on the town to demonstrate that the approval of it or the denial of it is reasonable. So make sure if there's any question about it, that the board goes into that information that you need to get to make sure this is based on reasonable facts. But you can base that on anything, not necessarily just even testimony that's provided tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. So the site is located at 3735 NC Highway 50 South. It's approximately 2.5 miles from our corporate boundary, nearest corporate boundary on NC Highway 50 or East Main Street, going south towards Meadow. The property owners are Joe and Susan Godwin. It's roughly 16.9 acres. Currently, the property is zoned. It has two zoning designations on it. It's ARSUD and RA, and the applicant would like to rezone the entire parcel to B2 conditional zoning. Right now, their existing uses includes a restaurant, an event space, and land that's still maintained for agricultural purposes. If you're familiar with it, it was formerly Enoch Winery and Bistro. The town is within the corporate limits. It was annexed between 2007 and 2010. Haven't been able to nail down the exact date, but it was some between that time frame. The utilities are provided by Johnston County. And again, with the conditional zoning, we're looking at the specific uses. It's intended to provide the landowner as well as the Board of Commissioners an alternative to rezoning, a traditional rezoning, again, where it allows those conditions to be placed upon the site through a concept plan or a site plan, which the applicant has provided. So they would like to maintain the two existing structures that were previously used for a restaurant and event space. And so roughly 3.11 acres has been, that's where that ARSUD that was issued by Johnston County before the property was annexed, and the remaining part land, 13.88 acres, remains for agricultural purposes. So they essentially would like to bring this into compliance. The SUP that was issued by the county was limited specifically for a retail store that allowed the products, which was wine. The winery produced the grapes and bottle the wine on site. That was the limit of their special use permit that was issued in 2007 by Johnson County. And so somehow when it was annexed to the town, that use no longer was valid, and they moved to a restaurant, banquet hall, event space. which was outside of the initial boundaries. So that's why we're bringing this to you tonight, to say let's go ahead and conditionally rezone this property, because it is that use is outside of what the established uses in that area are. It's predominantly residential and agricultural uses, but we would like to maintain the existing uses that were there as a restaurant and an event space. But with the conditional rezoning, it allows us to limit those uses specifically to a restaurant and an event space and winery, versus allowing all uses within the B2 district to be allowed at that site. And so any deviation from if this conditional rezoning is successful, any deviation from those conditions that are mutually agreed upon this evening will require a modification, either administratively, if it is a minor modification, or a major modification. That's if it ever changes a use, if it says it wants to close a restaurant and become a gas station. Well, that's well outside of the boundaries of what the uses are allowed in that district. That would constitute a major modification, and it would require the board to review that modification. The planning board did hear this request last week. They did recommend approval. They would like to see a Class B buffer on the rear property line. I will note that originally, with this special use permit that was issued through Johnston County, a Class B buffer was required at that time. And in our ordinance, when you have a B2 district adjacent to a agricultural residential, it does call out for a Class B buffer. But being that this is a conditional rezoning, that can be made, that determination tonight, if the board and the property owner comes to terms with that, whether to require that. So on your screen and in your staff report, this is the existing site. The two boxes that are highlighted there shows the existing restaurant space. And then further to the right, you have the event space banquet hall. Both buildings are roughly about 4,000 square feet. The event hall was permitted with the town of Benson in 2011. And then the remainder of the site remains where the vines are for the grapes production. And this is just to kind of show you a picture of on-site, the restaurant, and the event space. So everything is already built out. They're not proposing any change to what currently is there. They're not planning on expanding the footprints of the buildings or any other portion of the site. And they would like to maintain the agricultural production of the grapes and the vines. And this is an image that you can see from the front of the site where those vines are. As stated, it is currently zoned AR, SUD. Everything surrounding the site is within the county, so this is a satellite annexation. Of course, our future land use map does identify it for low-density residential, which would be in line with the surrounding area. And that's, again, why I felt that a conditional rezoning would be most appropriate for this site, given the history and the location, the existing conditions. So when you're looking at a conditional rezoning, there are 5 factors that you want to consider. Whether the proposed conditional rezoning advances the public health, safety, or welfare, whether the extent to which the proposed conditional rezoning is appropriate for its proposed location, whether an approval of the conditional rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest, to what extent the concept plan, we already have the site plan of the existing conditions, is consistent with ordinance and any other factors that the board deems relevant to this particular case. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Anybody have a question?
I've got one. It's more administrative. It doesn't have to do with this property. And say it's more to do with the rezoning, the conditional rezoning request. Typically in the report that we get from you, it has a paragraph in there that has